September 2nd, 2024 Daily Bread. John chapter 19, verses 17 through 30. Key verse 30. Jesus died. Carrying his own cross, he went out to the place of the skull, which in Aramaic is called Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with him 2 others, one on each side, and Jesus in the middle. Pilate had a notice prepared and fastened it to the cross. It read, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." Many of the Jews read this sign, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and the sign was written in Aramaic, Latin, and Greek. The chief priest of the Jews protested to Pilate, "Do not write, 'the King of the Jews,' but that this man claimed to be King of the Jews." Pilate answered, "What I have written, I have written." When the soldiers crucified Jesus, they took his clothes, dividing them into 4 shares, one for each of them, with the undergarment remaining. This garment was seamless, woven in one piece, from top to bottom. "Let's not tear it," they said to one another. "Let's decide by lot who will get it." This happened that the scripture might be fulfilled that said, "They divided my clothes among them, and cast lots for my garments." So this is what the soldiers did. Near the cross of Jesus stood his mother, his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother there, and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to her, "Woman, here is your son." And to the disciple, "Here is your mother." From that time on, this disciple took her into his home. Later, knowing that everything had now been finished, and so that scripture would be fulfilled, Jesus said, "I am thirsty." A jar of wine vinegar was there, so they soaked a sponge in it, put the sponge on a stalk of the hyssop plant, and lifted it to Jesus' lips. When he had received the drink, Jesus said, "It is finished." With that, he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. Daily Bread Message. Avoiding suffering and death is probably high on most of our agendas. We exercise, take our medicine, and try to play it safe to live a healthier and long life. But sooner or later, we all must face the prospect of death. Jesus certainly knew the value of life, but he was peculiarly familiar with suffering and death. Jesus was haunted down from his birth, and now finally faced death through the due process of a corrupt law system. Although he could have saved himself, he chose to take up his cross, suffer, and die. He entrusted his life and spirit to God. That God did not spare his one and only Son from death reveals that God is with us in both life and death. Jesus' mercy and love saves us from our self-condemnation and shame. Jesus' death shows that he was fully committed to redeeming us from the depth of our sin and darkness, and from the fear of death itself. Jesus came to be with us in these very moments so that we may find true comfort, mercy, and hope that arises from the depths of sin and despair. As a kernel of wheat dies and bears much fruit, so do our lives when we look to the cross of Jesus. Prayer. Lord, you died that we may have life. You are with us in our own suffering and death. You will see us through. One word, it is finished.